what type of guitar is that? Pardon my ignorance, but I'm not.
Oh, no,
I don't know.
it's all right. This guitar's been with me since 1994. It's an Ibanez. It's a prototype they built for me in early 1994. As I was starting to work with Ibanez from 1991 forward, and they were very, open to wanting to build whatever my ultimate guitar was. And I really, at that point in my career, didn't really know. I just was always just kind of fortunate to have a guitar. You know what I mean? So
Right.
now I had a company that was willing to just explore all the things that I loved about all the different instruments that I own. So this is basically like an old Stratocaster. It's vintage in its origin, but modern in some of the amenities that it has. A custom humbucker that DiMarzio makes for me, and this bridge is a little beefier than a standard Fender. But yeah, I owned quite a few guitars, but this is the one that I tend to gravitate towards for most of my work.
Wow. So I mean, is it hard to keep that in performance shape after all these years that you keep using it?
Yeah, it's so the frets, the metal little partitions here, for those that aren't guitar savvy, they're made of nickel, so they tend to wear down over time. So those have been replaced 8 different times, which is a pretty substantial amount of what's called refretting. And so, yeah, at one point, years ago, my luthier said, like, one day the neck is just going to disintegrate. It's like, I know. But, again, I have other guitars that actually may even sound better for certain things, for sure. But this one's there's such a comfort factor that, I've done so much with it. There's a relationship there. There's a really an intimacy, when we can really know the physicality of what and the sounds that you want to get out of the instrument, how to get them. But every guitar inspires me. Just about
Yeah.
anything that I pick up, it's gonna bring different parts of my personality out guitar wise, or may inspire me to do something completely new, just based
Right.
on the tone and the feel of it. So that's kind of an exciting journey too, just to try different things.
I always wonder about that. Like, is there one aspect that's more important? Is it the feel of the person, or is it the actual gear that they're playing, or does it have to be the perfect marriage of both? You'd be able to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything affects everything. There's no doubt about it. I mean, the ultimate, artistic musical experience for me is when all those are in alignment
Mm.
and all are benefiting each other. But that's, sometimes the adversity part, the adverse thing that's maybe not exactly what you're wanting. But again, that might kind of drive you in a certain way that, may affect something even greater than what you intended.
Right.
And sometimes less than. It can be very frustrating if things aren't lining up and you're not getting what you want. Certainly there's great chance for negativity as far as what your overall experience is. And these may be things that the listener notice or not,
Mm.
but certainly the player and the artist, it's going to be deeply felt. And sometimes it's just, it's down to your perseverance and your courage to just push through when it's not exactly like you want, but to realize, okay, I just got to do the best I can. And that's a continual thing. The show must go on no matter
Yeah.
what. Something's messing up your attitude, you break a string, you got to try everything you can to keep going. And that, just over the years of experience, a lifetime of being in those situations, you learn how to, figure it out along the way and make do the best you can.
For sure. I mean, do you find that there's more sort of unexpected elements that happen sort of out at shows, or, maybe in the recording environment? Because, the
Yeah.
average person would assume it's out at shows, but you never know.
No, for sure. No, it happens. It happens in both locations. But when you're in the recording studio, you do have the potential to just stop and correct if you need to. You can always, either punch into that performance or just start over. But there's kind of an expectation live that you just don't do that as much. Though it has been done. Sometimes it's like, if things are so messed up, like, whoa, let's start over.
Yeah.
I saw Dweezil Zappa do that once. He was actually, it was at a NAMM show, which is the big music convention where all the gear manufacturers are presenting their wares, and there's a lot of artists that gather, and there's concerts in the evening. Well, if you're familiar with the movie Spinal Tap,
Yeah.
like a classic rock and roll parody movie, that band of guys were doing a live show, which is very rare, and this is like in the 90s, so it hadn't happened that often. And Dweezil Zappa was the opener, and he had come up with this incredibly wonderful, complicated medley of like 100+ guitar riffs, all the classic
Wow.
rock stuff that you love, all strung together, right? And it's a very complicated thing to go from segue to segue to segue and get it all together.
Sounds like his dad.
It sounds like his dad, exactly. Something that he would have genetically an advantage, right?
Yeah.
One would hope anyway. But so he's in the middle of this performance, and there's probably somebody on the sound and lights that don't normally work with the band, so they're just doing the best they can. The sound guy will make it sound the best again. Well, the light guy was very excited, and he was flashing lights, and things were just going kind of crazy with the lights, and it just became too distracting for Dweezil. He says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! Stop, dude! You got to calm down on the lights. This stuff's hard enough as it is."
Seriously.
I thought that was great because you know what? Yeah, he's trying his best to deliver the best performance he can of this really creative and cool concept. It's like it's not possible with all the distractions. So every now and then there are those points where let's just call it and start over. But that was I thought it was totally endearing and a fun moment to go look. Okay, the musician up there is he needs a little help from the light guy, but. Anyway.
Yeah, I've seen that from a few artists. Like Adele will do that often, it seems like too.
Oh,
If she
really?
sees
Okay.
something in the crowd, or if she'll just say, nope, let's just do this again, So there's an
Wow.
integrity about that as well, I think. Even though, like you say, it's pretty rare.
It is rare, but no, but that's the thing. If it's to the point where it's just so adversely affecting the overall, then why not?
Yeah.
But I'm just saying in general, the experience generally was through time to just forge ahead, push through. We'll get this. But yeah,
100%.
You just got to read the room, see what the situation is, and go for it from there. But that's cool that Adele does it. I was not aware, but I'm a fan of her. I think she's great.
Oh yeah, incredible. It's great to see someone. What's that?
Yeah, I like her a lot. I've been a fan of her music. I've done some covers of a couple of her songs too. Yeah, just for live gigs. I used to do "Set Fire to the Rain" instrumentally.
Ooh.
I really dug that track a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, you typically these top 40, artists, they're not usually as talented and with that actual talent nowadays, right?
Yeah, well, that's a wide swath of a comment to make. So
that's true. That's true.
But no, but yeah, I know what you mean though, because Adele is a real singer. There's some pop acts that maybe rely a lot on tracks and would have a hard time, holding it up like. Let's get you in a room with a piano and hear you. If it's a
exactly.
Singer. So no, it is admirable when you see somebody that has that ability and the true gift and the work ethic to have developed that. Not that there's not beauty and power with the stuff that's not necessarily that. I'm not to each his own. We'll just say, but yeah, as me as a musician for sure. I'm always you can tell. The real deal when you hear it, and she's got that. Yeah. I love it.
No question about that. I was going through your social media just preparing for this interview, and I saw a post that you put up about the Beatles Now and Then.
Yeah.
Very curious, obviously, for people who don't know, the new Beatles song that was sort of also put together by Peter Jackson with the help of some AI. What can you tell us about your reaction to that track?
Well, it's when I say literally a lifetime of, or not lifetime, but I my first musical memory are the Beatles. What is the guitar solo of "I Saw Her Standing There." That's even though I didn't know what a guitar solo was, that's my earliest musical memory. That reverberated guitar sound. So literally, the Beatles have been with me my entire life, and I'm 60. Wow. I was born in 63. And that's just right on the cusp of when they were about to break in America. 64, they appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show in February. And I had an older brother that was 12 years older than I and bought every Beatles single as it came out in real time. For literally from the cradle, this has been something that's just I've loved and it's been a part of my life. Well, when the Beatles collaborated and released the anthology video series in the mid-90s, to go along with that, Yoko had given a cassette to George and Paul and said, "Hey, these are some demos that John had done. Would you consider recording to this and making new music?" And that's exactly what happened. So Ringo and George and Paul got together and they completed 2 songs. One was called "Free as a Bird" and one was called "Real Love." And to great effect. There's John's voice, then you hear Paul's voice. And for people that had grown with that music and loved it so much, it was very emotional. And
Yeah.
in the videos that were done with it, it was really deep. But there was a third track that they had agreed to work on called Now and Then. But they aborted the process. They began work on it. There was a pretty good 60 cycle hum along with the piano and voice. With the technology of the time, they couldn't really extract it. They could work with EQ to try to minimize it. George went off of it, as Paul would say. He didn't think it was that strong of a track compared to the others, and he might have been right, to be honest.
Hmm.
But
Which album would this have been, by the way? Do we know?
yeah, all these tracks were being added to the Anthology 1,
Okay.
Anthology 2, and Anthology 3. There was 3 double disc sets of rarities and outtakes that got released with a very extensive video series that appeared initially on ABC television here in the States, but then was released on DVD and VHS. But we've all known about this track Now and Then that never got finished. Like, what would it have sounded like? And there were various fan versions that, the actual source tapes, all these John Lennon demos somehow leaked out in the 90s. And some of the earliest things I ever downloaded on the internet when I first got my first computer were these demos.
Wow. So those were solo demos. Like if he would have put that out, it would have been on his solo record.
It eventually would have been something he might have done on a record, because he was in kind of a self-imposed retirement from 75 to 80 when his son Sean Lennon was born in 75. He kind of withdrew himself from the music business, stayed home to take care of his son, and Yoko was kind of taking care of business. But in 79, 80, he came out of retirement, recorded a record called Double Fantasy with Yoko, and that had just been released right when he was murdered. And so, but all these demos might have been songs that would have been on subsequent records, you see.
Okay.
So all that said, Paul had intimated a few times over the years, Now and Then I'd like to go back and finish that one up. And George had worked on it. So what ended up happening was they took whatever tracks that Jeff Lynne had, when he was the ELO producer, had produced with him when they did the others. And so there would have been some acoustic guitar playing for George. And then Ringo redid his drums, Paul played bass, a bit more guitar, and they were able to use. Well, I should address the AI thing. So what's happened now is that there's been more and more ability to be able to separate mono source tracks into multi tracks. Now this was further extremely improved during the making of the Let It Be Get Back film that Peter Jackson did. That they were able to take us during that whole recording session of what became the Let It Be record. They were filming everything. The Beatles were in 1969, and there was, even when videotape wasn't running or film wasn't running, they were recording mono quarter-inch Nagra, these little Nagra tape decks, was running all the time, that captured conversation and jams and whatnot.
Right.
So very muddy mixes, and whatever was closest to the tape recorder, that was louder than, like, if the bass was here and the guitars were over there. Well, you're just going to hear mostly bass, and there was conversation. So Peter Jackson tasked his crew to, like, we need to improve this technology, this AI that can do this. So they finally got a computer that was able to, okay, tell it this is John's voice, this is George's voice, this is Paul's voice, this is Ringo's voice, this is a kick drum. It could demix a mono muddy tape. And if you listen to what that documentary, they were able to take some really crappy sounding tape and make a beautiful mix out of it. So what they were able to do with Now and Then was they had this kind of muddy piano that was overshadowing the voice and this hum. They could completely and perfectly extract John's voice. And
that's insane.
There's a 12-minute documentary that preceded the release of the single the day before, and they have John's voice soloed, and it's chill bump inducing. I'm still thinking about it now because it's perfect. It's like, oh my God. So some people, when they heard AI, they thought, oh dear, this is, they're recreating John's voice or something. It had nothing to do with that. That technology may also be coming along, as some of you know, but it had nothing to do with that. It was just to clarify John's voice, and then they were able to track around that and make what I think is a really, really beautiful track. the track on its own is really really cool. It's emotional, but with the following day, that's when Peter Jackson's video was released, and
Hmm.
that's when the tears just freaking rolled out. You know, this what he was able to do with new and old footage and how he put it together. There's certainly the sadness of it because this is the final time they'll all be together. But there was a lot of great irreverence and comedy because
Hmm.
that's who they were as people. They were always, you know, with great levity and incredible wit. All of them were sharp, you know, really funny guys. Liverpudlians, you know, were tough. You know,
Yeah.
they had a lot of street in them, you know, and that helped them navigate through all that incredibly ridiculous amount of fame. They did their best to handle it with you know, they didn't take it too seriously.
Well, even on the Ed Sullivan performance, I think John was cracking his sort of jokes, and like that was the first time we got to see his little brand of humor, and that just continued to grow throughout their career, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you see it in even some performances that precede that when they're performing for the Queen in
Mm.
1963. So Royal Command performances. And he says that they're about to do Twist and Shout. So you in the cheap seats, you know, clap along, but you upstairs just rattle your jewelry, pointing to
All
the corner.
right.
Just rattle your jewelry, and the place went nuts. But yeah, when they landed to what JFK airport in New York in that early '64 before the Ed Sullivan Show, they had a press conference and they were funny dudes, man. They then
Mm.
the press ate it up like, oh my god, we could have fun with these guys, and it just really it helped cement the love affair. The music was joyous on its own, but these guys looked like aliens. There was nobody had those haircuts at that point. You got to realize
Yeah.
how outrageous it was. But they had the goods. They were a well-oiled band, man. They had been playing all those hours and hours in the Cavern in Hamburg, where they play 8 hours a night, and it just they were killing. And so the same AI technology was also used the following week. These hits compilations, the Red Album and the Blue Album, that chronicle their
Mm.
whole career. The early tunes, some of them had never had a stereo mix, but they went
Wow.
back and were able to use the same technology. If it was just, and some of those recordings were just literally 2 track, like band on one side, vocals on the other. But they could now demix those things and get a bit more separation, a little bit more quality. And Giles Martin and whoever, it might have been Sam O'Kell, I'm not sure, but they did an incredible job of not over recreating the wheel, but very
Mm.
respectfully give these songs a little bit of a new perspective and a new life. There's certainly plenty of purists out there that would maybe balk at you shouldn't mess with Da Vinci, right?
Right.
But yeah, for me, who's heard every possible mix and variation and outtake, it's gold. It's just another
Mhm.
way. And especially like She Loves You never had a stereo mix, and they could never remix it in stereo because the mono tape somehow had disappeared. I mean, the master tapes had disappeared. So it's just riveting, and it's just joyous, and that they still elicit, meaning the Beatles themselves, the music and the history still elicits such interest and love and passion.
Yeah.
This many years on, where they, when they were first at the huge, blowing up fame, like, well, how long do you think it'll last? Oh, maybe 2 years. I don't know. What are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to open a hair salon. I'm going to,
Yeah.
they couldn't have predicted. But
No.
but it does. The music stands up. It stands the test of time. And again, I just feel fortunate that I've had it my whole life, man. And I still love it. You think at some point, yeah, I might get a little burned out, and it's not like I listen 24/7 every day, but it's just
Right.
something that I continually come back to, and it is my foundation when we talk about you know how I write and how I conceive melodies and whatever music I come up with. It's coming from a lot of different places, but that's the foundation for me. It's
Yeah.
that's something that's still a part of everything that I do.
It's fascinating too, what you mentioned about the Get Back film, because I think
Yeah.
it was, that gives me a whole new appreciation. I watched the whole thing, and I think it was more so sold as, like in layman's terms, sort of, we found all this great old footage of the Beatles. That's sort of how it was sold from Disney. But
Yeah.
to think that it was generated in such a way and there was so many fine points, even just to get this footage and audio out there, is pretty mind blowing to think of.
You have to understand that when the original movie was put out, so again, it was filmed in '69. it was shelved for a while, and then at that, because they kind of were estranged from George Martin, and that's why they were a bit rudderless. Paul was kind of leading, but after they finished that record and it hadn't come out yet, and they went back to George Martin and said, look, and they knew where they were breaking up. In the film, you can see the fissures, you can see the cracks very visibly. So they went to George Martin and said, we want to record one more record. And George very famously said, only if you let me produce it like we used to. Meaning, hey, I'm in control here. Let's do this. Let's make a great record. And they made Abbey Road. Wow. Frickin' Abbey Road. So Let It Be didn't come out until after Abbey Road. But when the film was released, they released it into the theaters. I'm not sure if it was 70 or 71. And I finally saw it in the mid 70s, packaged with Help and Hard Day's Night in a theater in Evansville, Indiana, where I grew up. It was really dark and really depressing. The original cut of the film really kind of chose most of the arguments and the unhappiness. And the film was dingy and it just looked horrible. The audio was out of sync with the video, which is very disconcerting for anybody, but especially for musicians. And just the narrative that the original director decided to edit. So what Peter Jackson did, not only did he was able to use the AI for the audio to improve that, but the video he'd already used on a World War I documentary. I forget the name. I'm so sorry. But they shall not remain nameless or something. But he'd already used this technology to be able to enhance and improve aged, dingy film. So that's why the Get Back film looks like it'd been shot, a year ago. It just had this vibrant thing. You really see the colors, and there was so much joy that all this film that ended up on the cutting room floor, not even considered. There was so much love and joy between them, even though they were trying to handle the pressure of being the Beatles. They were growing up. They were, everybody was getting married and leading their own lives. They were just fed up with the whole thing, and it's understandable. But within that, there's still these four guys that shared all this stuff, and so many great moments of levity and joy and productivity. And when you see Paul sit there and write "Get Back" out of thin air on his bass, it's just, things like that. Or John and Paul in the break room discussing, they really hurt George, man. They really hurt him, and he left the band. It's like John's exact quote was like, he had a deep wound and we just made it worse, and we didn't give him a Band-Aid. Right. That's a deep thing.
That's deep.
And because it was off camera, they were speaking differently. They weren't on. They were really aware of their buddy that was hurting, and it was deep. There were several times where I had to turn it off because I was overwhelmed with emotion. That was one of those moments. Or the next day when it's just Paul and Ringo showing up to the studio, and George has quit, John's not showing up, and Paul says something like, "Then there were two."
Right, and he's crying.
The camera stays on him, and he's tearing up, and you've never seen that emotion from Paul McCartney. He always keeps that stiff upper lip, that British. All right, lads, let's go. Much to his credit, but man, when you saw that vulnerability, and boy, it's heavy. I'm welling up now just because. Yeah. What a perspective, and again, what a gift, because Peter Jackson gets it. I don't know if he's the same age as I, but I suspect that he's as big a geek as I am to this point. But what he's been able to do with his toolbox and get this material to us fans, he knew that these were things that this would mean a lot.
Yeah, it would go far for a lot of people, right?
Oh,
and he could feel that too.
Even John, even Ringo and Paul, when they saw the new footage, they were like, "Oh my God." I bought into the whole thing that we hated each other because they'd seen the film. They have their, some of those memories would have stood out, but you see all the joy and so much beauty that it just reminded them,
Yeah.
we really loved each other, despite legal and just insane, the world at their doorstep, 24/7. Yeah. Unimaginable, the pressure of what they had to have been going through. They were just these guys that wanted to make some music.
That's the thing. And I think it's been mentioned too that they were pretty much the first huge band, right? Because there was like Elvis and maybe some solo people, but there was never really a big
Yeah.
band that was collectively big like that.
The Buddy Holly and the Crickets arguably were
Okay.
one of the early real bands where they were writing their own music and they were recording, but yeah, Bill Haley and the Comets, but it was the Buddy Holly thing where Buddy was writing and he was singing. The Beatles really looked to them, and they looked to the Everly Brothers. But that was the thing they talked about in the anthology. It's a really interesting quote where they felt sorry for Elvis because he was
Right.
the only one that would have known what that fame was like in the rock and roll. There was certainly Sinatra before them or Bing Crosby that were heartthrob teen idols, but Elvis was the first rock and roll idol. But then the Beatles came along. But the quote that I remember is like, well, there was one Elvis. We had four Beatles. Like if somebody was really starting to get too big for their britches or out of sorts, like, okay, come on, man, back to the
Yeah. Back to
reality.
reality.
They could keep themselves in check, but Elvis clearly didn't have that, and it killed him. He had a bunch of sycophants that were all yes people because they, stay on that payroll. Nobody could say no. Michael Jackson, I would offer, is a similar situation.
100%.
And they paid the ultimate price, man. It's really sad.
Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, you're right though. They were the first major stars as far as a rock band goes. No drummer had been up on a riser like that for on the
Right.
Ed Sullivan show. That the way he played. There's a film that was done of a live show they did at the Washington Coliseum right around that time. Yeah, you can find it. It's on YouTube, and there was a DVD VHS. It's just the Beatles live in '64, Washington D.C. Coliseum. And you got to watch Ringo. Because there's really not much of a PA, and they're playing in this. So it's a small Coliseum, and they have to turn their gear every few songs because it's in the round. But Ringo's just killing. He's rocking so hard, man, just to be heard, So he's just the first, real rock, arena player. It's just incredible. And really beautiful to see.
So at arena shows at that time, they didn't have like PA so everybody could hear it like they do today.
Well, not near the sound reinforcement, no monitors, right? So they came back later in '64 and did Shea Stadium, or was that was '65? But '64 they did like a bunch of baseball stadiums, the Hollywood Bowl, and there's a lot of bootleg recordings. So in some better than others depending on the sound reinforcement, but there was never any monitors, and it sounded like a jet landing with all the girls screaming.
Yeah.
So how they stayed on key at all is just mind blowing,
Because you would see people with their ears like plugging their ears in the crowd, right?
That was because of the screaming.
Yeah.
It was not insane. Because the music was too loud. You couldn't hear the music. All you heard was that's why they got so disillusioned, is that they knew people, they couldn't be heard. It's like it seemed pointless. And that's why in '66, I think it was August, Candlestick Park in San Francisco, they decided that's it. No more touring. We're just going to record. Their idea was we'll send the record on tour. And that's when they made Sgt. Pepper, because they had just made Revolver, with the Paperback Writer being the single that came out around the same time. They really couldn't replicate what they were doing in the studio as they got more adventure. So they said, okay, look, that pressure's off. No more touring. Let's just make the best record we can. And Sgt. Pepper is the fruit of that ethos.
Obviously a good choice.
Not bad. Yeah, not bad. Not bad.
Not bad at all. Speaking of legendary bands that, are having their last hurrah, just like the Now and Then song, Kiss, of course, currently on their last, I think 18 shows left or something like that.
Wow.
Just caught them the other night. It was incredible. I know you've toured with Kiss. Maybe if you could tell us about that. Yeah,
we were, that was in the Danger days. So they were next for me, where the Beatles in the '60s, pop and rock were my foundation because of my older brothers. Kiss was the first band where when I started working when I was about 12, 13, that I had, income to buy my own records. Now it wasn't just hand-me-down stuff. So the first, I was sweeping hair at a barbershop, the Lawndale Barbershop in Evansville, Indiana. And the first bit of money that I made, it might have been 25 or 30 bucks for the week. I went straight to Karma Records and bought Kiss Alive and the Raspberries Greatest Hits, which is, kind of the bookends of like, here I am, there's the pop stuff, and there's the heavier rock.
Yeah.
And that's literally how I learned how to play guitar, was listening to Ace Frehley and those songs and in my bedroom, because I didn't have a teacher at this point, and just had my ear and a record player. So yeah, to fast, and the first concert I ever saw was 1976 on the Destroyer tour,
Wow.
where I go. My mother drops me off by myself to go to Robert Stadium and see Kiss. Bob Seger was opening up, and
Nice.
anyway, Destroyer tour, Kiss. It was like, I was in the last seat in the very top back row of the arena, all the pot smoke, because that was, back then the whole arena was just one big haze of
Yeah.
marijuana, which I didn't know. That was my first experience and all that. So I don't really remember the second half of the show, but
And you could smoke in there at the time, right? Like cigarettes?
oh yeah, that
Okay,
was
yeah. So everybody was just smoking joints too.
restaurants, yeah, for sure. No doubt. There was, like, I vividly remember the smell of the guy in front of me. Again, I'd never been exposed to it, and it wasn't
Right.
a thing in my wheelhouse. So, but just the overall thing of, like, because I was already playing guitar and I was learning, and I was like, that was this is what I want to do. There was no
Mhm.
question. I didn't even know if it was possible, or it was such a fantasy island thing. But then fast forward to 1990, and there I am in Danger Day. How many years is that? 14 years later.
Hmm.
I'm touring, opening for these same guys. Well, of course, Gene and Paul at that point, with it was Eric Singer's last
Yeah.
tour. Not Eric Singer, I'm sorry, Eric Carr.
Eric
Eric
Carr.
Carr's tour, and Bruce Kulick, really great band. And then so we did that. It was part of just a portion of the Hot in the Shade tour, which was 1990. Then we did another set of dates in 1992 in the UK on the Kiss Revenge tour, and that was with Eric Singer, because
Nice.
Eric, like I said, had passed in, I think, 1990 or 91.
Hmm.
Sadly, yeah, sweet guy, great player, but Eric Singer, of course, who now
Yeah.
continues to work with the band. Yeah, just phenomenal, just great memories. And Gene and Paul were, they were really sharp guys and really funny guys, and we got along great. A lot of just fun, moments along the way. This is just goofy dudes from New York City, but yeah.
Yeah.
So we learned a lot as a younger up and coming band, and getting the chance to play, some of the arenas and bigger gigs, just seeing how they projected and how they could handle that size of a crowd in that kind of
Mm.
room. And but the overriding moral also being, Gene and Paul were never alcohol or drug, you know, uh, partakers. What do
Yeah.
you want to say? They kept it together, and the eye was always on the ball. The legendary, their business acumen for sure.
Yeah.
But they, yeah, so it's great that, and I did get to see them when they first put the makeup back on, and for
Mm.
those farewell tours or whatever those
Yeah,
were,
exactly. The
reunion.
2000 farewell.
Yeah, what's is dude, and we all know at some point there'll be a Kiss sanctioned band, and Gene and Paul can stay home, But it's the kind of thing where that spectacle and that just the fun of the theater of it and the music, it can be enjoyed for many years forward. Those guys have earned a stay at home, I think. But yeah,
Yeah.
massive respect, and I still love that. I still love particularly the early stuff, and Ace Frehley and Peter,
Oh yeah, they're
that original
incredible.
that original core,
It
Yeah.
it blew my mind because I went to their sound check, like I said the other day, and
Oh
just
yeah.
watching the way that their team operated and the way that they were such a well-oiled machine. I
Sure.
was thinking to myself, how did Ace and Peter, I mean, I love them, but how did
Yeah.
they even last so long? Because I can't
Yeah.
imagine being on drugs or alcohol around Gene and Paul.
Well, that was the case, and obviously it didn't work out for them originally. And I think Peter and Ace kind of peeled off separately and gradually along the way. But then they did the reunion, and it was, I remember Gene famously saying, "The magic is back,"
Right.
and it's true. There was a swagger about, they weren't, the tight musicians that Tommy Thayer, Bruce Kulick, Eric Carr, and Eric Singer, are, but the chemistry,
Oh yeah.
it's not always about that. It's the chemistry and what they originally did. So when they did the reunion, it's like I said, this is what a great thing. They're getting kind of a second chance at, improving their lifestyle and to be able to get it together. But I think that just the old behaviors just kept going. I don't know specifically, and it's not my business to say, but chances are, yeah, that it just wasn't possible for that those four to stay together because of those very different chosen lifestyles. I do understand Ace has been sober for many years now,
Yeah.
and and apparently a new record coming out that, by all reports, is pretty kick ass. So I really look forward to that because I have a lot of respect and love for what he gave me and countless other young guitar players starting out, especially back in the '70s, that can all point to because he was the perfect amalgamation of all just the classic Page and Beck and Townsend, British invasion rock, blues guys.
Hmm.
And had I always likened him to be kind of being the Slash of his day, where
Yeah.
never got maybe the respect, that he maybe deserved. You know what I'm saying? But the way he composed his solos and played really, really nicely in a very cool vibrato. Yeah, he's
The
up there for
American Keith Richards, I've heard it coined that way.
that could be in a way, but yeah, just different types of thing because he was much more the lead guitar player. But
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
No question. I was curious as well. Obviously, you've had, so much work in your own groups and as well a lot of session stuff also. Just curious about Olivia Newton-John. Of course, you were
Yeah,
her musical director on many occasions and just
yeah.
obviously a lot of sessions with her. How did that exactly kick off?
Well, yeah, it was 15 years of us working together,
Yeah.
and it was all just because Simon Phillips was the catalyst there, my legendary drummer that I worked with for many years in his fusion group that eventually became called Protocol. But Simon and I had worked together. He was still in Toto, but we would do these tours of playing his kind of fusion stuff. And Olivia had been retired since the early '90s. She had breast cancer, and I think it was around '99 that she'd done a few shows in Australia after having been retired for literally 7 years. Enjoyed it and decided, well, she'd come to the States to do a tour. And her management, Fitzgerald Hartley, was the same management as Toto. So they had an Australian band that was coming over, the John Farnham backing band, great bunch of musicians, were coming to do the tour with Olivia, but one of the guitar players, Brett Garzard, couldn't make the tour. And so they just put feelers out and through management, hey guys, we need a guitar player. Who do you know? And Simon chimed in, so why this guy Andy's does his homework, great player, So I get a call from Simon, Andy, fancy working with Olivia Newton-John? I'm like, sure,
Why
why not?
not?
So anyway, I agreed to do this tour. I think it might have been a couple of months worth of dates. Turns out it was probably the longest tour I ever did with her. All that said was, management and Olivia saw, how much love and respect I had for the music, which was, natural because I grew up, as a fan. Just like we're talking about Adele, there she was in 1973 with Have You Never Been Mellow? And I was like, yeah, I love this.
Yeah.
Right.
She was
Great voice.
huge.
Yeah, she was huge across a wide span of genres too along the way, kind of country at first and pop and even some jazz and rock and roll along the way. And so, but yeah, management, they recognize, hey, Andy's got his act together. Next time we tour the States, let's just make him the band leader and let's form a US based group. That would save them the expense of flying over Australians.
Hmm.
Every time, and that literally became 15 years of some of my favorite gigs I've ever done, and being with some of my favorite people. Starting with her because I loved her immensely, still do. We were very close through all those years, and yeah, a lot of great times. She, as iconic of an artist and singer as she is and was, she's Australian. And if you ever met any Australian people, they're just kind of the coolest people on the planet. Very
Absolutely.
great wit, irreverent, serious, but in the right way when necessary, but not too serious. And Olivia she was a great friend to hang with. You had to get past, oh God, it's Olivia.
Right.
But she had the gift of, and I hear McCartney's like this. She had the gift of immediately making people feel at ease. If you met her, you felt like you knew her, and you were completely comfortable. So, yeah, I mean, I can't say enough great things. And people would ask me, "Oh, yeah, what's she really like?" I'm like, kind of better than you think. And most people
Right.
think she's an angel. Yeah. But she worked hard, man. She was tireless, and as a philanthropist, but also as a cancer awareness.
Hmm.
She really did a lot to help people. She helped me. I'm 10 years a cancer survivor, and
Wow.
largely because I heard her voice. I could tell something was wrong with my body. She said, if you ever feel like anything's wrong, just go to the doctor. Don't wait.
Hmm.
Just check it out. And most guys in general tend to go, oh, I'm fine. I got this and whatever. Pain, worked it. But I could just tell he says, listen to your body. And sure enough, I went to the doctor one day on a Monday. Thursday, I was in surgery.
Wow.
It was like, yeah, thank God you came in. This is a very aggressive form of cancer. So the fact that I'm sitting here right now, I can literally
Yeah, thank
attribute
God for that, man.
my relationship with Olivia and what I learned from her. So
Wow.
anyway, yeah,
That's incredible by the grace of God. I mean, we talked about sort of the Beatles, Elvis, other people getting
yeah,
caught in that fame bubble.
yeah, yeah.
Do you feel like Olivia had any of that from Greece? Because I feel like fame was so different back then. It's not like there was 20 streaming services with movies. It's like this was the musical when it came out and she was so big.
Yeah, it's really interesting, the phenomena of that movie. And I didn't see it when it first came out. I was, of course, very aware of it and Saturday Night Fever and some of these huge musical movies. It wasn't something I was drawn to go see, but I remember how many people were into it. And my girlfriend in high school being just in love with Olivia and hearing it. But that movie, even after, even in the movie theater era, of course, and then my wife, being a huge Olivia fan, watched it incessantly on Laserdisc growing up because
Right.
her dad was, always had the technology. But when we would do shows, and again I started working with her in '99. There was people from 8 to 80 because you had all the people that had grown up with her and were fans. But subsequently, that Grease just played in perpetuity on television. Was always running somewhere.
Yeah.
And it just seemed to keep going. And that would be the biggest. Playing that material, that people would just go nuts every night. Amongst all these other hit songs, it was clearly still a thing. So I don't know. And she was definitely huge, but I don't know if it affected her in quite that way, like the Beatles
Hmm.
or. And she was, again, even in the time I was working with her, which we could consider a later career, she wasn't shy about public. She
Hmm.
was very much okay with being out and about, and she could graciously handle, if she's recognized or handling somebody wants a photo or an autograph or whatever. But yeah, it didn't slow her down. It didn't keep her from having a great life. Whereas I can imagine Beatles and Elvis or Michael Jackson, it was a different level.
That's true. Definitely. Yeah. A different level entirely. It's
Yeah.
incredible to hear about though, man, and to think about, the different levels of things. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, man. I don't know if that guitar is plugged in at all. It looks good though.
Always plugged in. It's my whoopee. It's always with me. It's like my security blanket. It's like,
That's so badass, man. I saw the song of the month, by the way. It was incredible.
oh yeah,
Any hints on the next song of the month that might come out?
yeah. So for those that don't know, I have a subscription guitar instructional site. It's called Guitar Experience. No E before the X. GuitarExperience.net. And every month I release a tune from my back catalog. So I do a playthrough. You see me on camera playing the song, but then I'll teach, kind of like we're sitting here now. I'll go through and play note for note each passage and explain, what it is, why it is, why what it means, and how I'm doing it. And I have a partner that in Brazil that transcribes everything, so they can see it in tablature, musical notation, or GPX, which is a Guitar Pro file that the computer can play the transcription for you to learn
Wow.
each note. So it's a really cool thing, and it's really, selfishly for me, it's informative because I'm having to, I'll break down in real time all these techniques and lines that I'm playing, and I'll recognize, oh, that's something cool. I need to work on more. It's like, so I'm teaching, but I'm learning along the way too, because it's
Yeah.
in this endless game and puzzle of music and art, and it's I get more and more inspired. So the next one is not been decided, but there's a good chance it'll be a new single that I'm about to release. I have two
Nice.
singles. I have two singles in the can. One is a solo guitar piece, it's similar to what I've done, like pieces like Here Lies the Heart, But I've also written a song for Mr. Peter Frampton.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, so he's recorded his part on it. And you'll see that in the next month or two. I've just got to finish my end of the video up. But that's a pretty cool song. Yes, I'll tease you with that one. So it could be the song I wrote for Peter Frampton, or it could be another one of my solo ballad pieces. So
Very cool. Okay. Well,
I'll decide this week. It's like seat of my pants, just kind of making it up as I go. But yeah,
sounds fun, man. And that's
yeah, it is.
that's got to be keep it fresh, right?
Absolutely, and I learn a bit, so I'm always keen to do that. And if it's helping some other players, and when from the response I get, I know it is, and so it's a nice, part of my legacy that I can document all these pieces of music from my very earliest career,
Yeah.
and play it, and so it'll be there forever. For when I'm no longer able to play or around to play. It's nice that stuff will be there for those interested. It's I'm happy to be taking care of all that in advance.
I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. For anybody who wants to check out the lessons or anything else, Andy Timmons, we got all the links down
Yeah.
below in the description, and make sure to let him know that you saw the link from this interview. And Andy, I really
Yeah.
appreciate you again, man.
I appreciate you too, Cassius, and I'm glad we got to speak to the whole Beatles thing, because I
Yeah.
haven't addressed it, so this will be a nice documentation of my thoughts on that. I appreciate you providing the platform for me to do so.